Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we're excited to have Logan Berry, who is a senior strategist with GDP Advisors out of Texas. And Logan sits in a pretty interesting position for clients in that his day-to-day role is to help clients build strategy and advise them on the best way to execute towards their goals. So we're really excited to have this conversation today. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Getting Past the Premium podcast, where we focus on breaking down risk management problems bit by bit until we find a solution. If you would like to discuss anything you hear on GPP with us, please reach out using the links in the description. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome, man.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good. We were lucky enough to have you up for, a couple weddings in a row?
Yeah, a couple weddings, getting back to the Nebraska roots.
Yeah, that's
right.
Like
to be back here as much as I can, and I've enjoyed the time. Nice to have an office to be in as well.
That's true, right?
You're from Elkhorn?
From Elkhorn,
Yeah.
yep. I'm an Antler, so there's only one high school when I was there. I think now there's, three?
Yeah.
3, yeah.
So,
It's kind of crazy.
oh yeah.
So why don't you just kind of give your background for everybody listening, kind of how you got to what you're doing today, because I think you've got, a deep background in the health insurance space and a lot of different stuff. So maybe start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, graduated University of Nebraska, go Big Red. Hopefully we can pull it out here pretty soon. Who knows? I will say,
be proud of that right now.
I was, graduated with a finance degree, so didn't really know what I was going to get into after college. Really didn't think I was going to be in the insurance space, probably like a lot of other people that are out there today in the industry. Moved down to Dallas, followed, my now wife, who is way out of my league, so I had to do that.
Kicked your coverage.
Oh, yeah, completely. And ended up working, kind of got my first job out of college at a TPA, or third-party administrator. Worked in the finance department doing premium reconciliation. Was there for a couple years and got promoted to kind of oversee our bundled payment surgery program, Centers of Excellence surgery program, and loved it, right? And I was very fortunate to kind of be brought along in a lot of the sales presentations. And the TPA that I worked at really worked with large employers. And what I had found out very early working at the TPA is that the healthcare really reimbursement system and insurance in general, the entire industry, I think, is broken, right? And we all know that today. And working for the TPA, we'd go into some of these meetings, some of these sales presentations, and be showing millions of dollars in savings. And what I found out pretty quickly is that, there were lazy brokers out there that just kind of wanted to renew fully insured, get their increase in commissions from the increase in premium, and really not do a whole lot. And I was kind of fed up with it, and I kind of, looked at the broker industry kind of in a negative facet. And so, through my time there, I'd kind of started to read books and really figure out what was going on. And then also through networking opportunities, had a chance to kind of meet Seth Denson, or was introduced to Seth, I should say. And it was just a conversation at first, an introduction between him and I. And I think, one of the very first things I said to Seth was, he asked, why would you want to be on this side of the table? And frankly, I told him I didn't want to.
It's funny how that works. Right?
Yeah. I told him I didn't know what brokers did, because from what I had experienced, they really didn't do a whole lot. And they just seemed to kind of be the problem, or one of the problems. And I was, pretty aggressive in my tone towards him. And if you know Seth, he actually kind of took it, fairly well.
Yeah.
But laughed, sat back, and what he said to me was, well, that's great. That's why I think you would be a good fit here. And I quickly knew then that he was doing something different at GDP. And after I learned a little bit more, I was thrilled to be a part of it. And so a few months later, that's where I found myself. And now I manage the strategy department at GDP on a daily basis. So.
Yeah. Knowing Seth, and I think he was, guest number 2, Big Al? I think he was number 2. Good or bad, I don't know. But Knowing Seth, I would like to be a fly on the wall during that conversation with you guys.
Yeah, it went over pretty well. I will say we both had a couple old fashions in us at the time, so
even better.
No, it was great. And then got the chance to meet John Powder, who thought the same way, brought kind of a different spin on things.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was a good organization and somewhere where I wanted to be.
How long have you been there?
I've been there now just a little over 3 years.
Okay.
Time flies. So
yeah, that's crazy. So what then at GDP, you mentioned senior strategist, like what does that mean? What do you do for a client on a regular basis?
Yeah, so I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the title of a strategist.
Yeah.
Right? Because that can mean a million different things. But at the end of the day, I think really it defines exactly what I do and what my team does. And we manage the claims. We manage the risk within those claims. And in order to do that, you need to be consistently reviewing it, using data analytics to identify risk. But also, we're trying to tell the story of each client, and each client's story is different, right? So what is the health of the population? Where is the risk associated with the health? What is the organization's goals? A lot of people just focus on benefits as a one-year strategy. And if you're looking to sell next year, that's great. But really, it's one of your biggest expenses on your P&L, and so you should manage it as an asset, and that's truly what we do. So in simple terms, I manage the financial component of the benefits. And then I build strategies, and my team builds strategies based on the goals of the organization and what the claims data is telling us, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's super intriguing. It fits right into, what we talk about every episode on the podcast. But why I thought it'd be interesting to have you on is, you're living it, daily with clients in a lot of regards. Where folks in the industry aren't the one that's out driving that strategy. Or if it might be a small part of what they do if they're an advisor, And so making that shift to where, at GDP you have a team of people that is doing that really allows you guys to drive that advisory model,
Absolutely.
terminology. But
Absolutely. Yeah. And listen, it's not easy to do that on a day in and day out basis, right? And it's not just me. Mm-hmm. So you've heard us say team a lot, and we have a full technology team, an account executive, an account manager, and then you have your strategy team as well. So there's 5 or 6 individuals working on each client's account. We can never do it. I can never do it alone. No one could ever do it alone because it's a lot of work, and it's tough. And I think that's why it's pretty hard to replicate.
Yeah.
But the model we've built works, and I think it's probably the best one in the industry today.
Yeah. Totally agree. I'm curious, before we get into kind of maybe a little bit more of how you do that and some of the things we talked about before we started, because you mentioned, your viewpoint when you're at the TPA of brokers. And I'm just curious to elaborate on that a little bit. Like, why did you feel that way? Why do you think that was the perception? What were brokers doing or not doing that led to that perception? Because that's what we talk about. Is the whole point is going from being a product-based sales industry to a risk management advisory industry, or advisor to our clients.
Yeah.
I'm just curious your perspective from thinking back to those days.
I think you and I were having dinner the other day, and I think I, maybe used some explicit content. I think I said the word broker should be taken out of our vocabulary entirely.
Yeah.
Because I believe, brokers sell products. And we don't sell a product, we sell a service and a strategy. And so in order to do that, you have to consistently work with the client on a day-to-day basis, consistently work in the data on a day-to-day basis in order to be successful. And I think traditionally, you sell a product, a broker sells a product, and then they come around every once in a while, they'll let you know how it's going, or, hey, we got your renewal, it's pretty big, let me go try to negotiate for you now. But what's driving that renewal, right? Yeah. And a lot of times you're not getting that. And then, the way that some commissions, and everyone knows this, and I'm sure you guys have talked about it a ton, there needs to be transparency in our industry. And so the way some commissions are structured, I don't necessarily agree with as a percentage of premium, and, your premiums increase so our commissions go up. It shouldn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so, there's a very long-winded answer that I could give you, but at the end of the day, the work's not being put in the traditional broker model to get the good results, right? And so you have to truly be a consultant and advisor of the client, be looking out for their own interest, and just pushing a product or shopping products every year is not going to get it done.
Absolutely.
Before we move off this topic, Logan, like, why aren't more consumers educated on the way that you do business versus, because what would you say, like 95% of companies don't look at their benefit package from a strategy standpoint like this? Like, you brought up an interesting thing we're going to chat about later around, well, what happens if a company sells in 1 year?
Yeah.
It's different than, are you going to run a 5-10 year strategy because you're going to keep the company and you're focused on attracting, retaining key employees and
Mm-hmm.
But like, why aren't more consumers educated around it? What's the problem?
Yeah, so if you're using the word consumer as an employer and as a client, I would say, they're used to just getting the same thing over and over again, and kind of, shopping insurance in the same manner, and not thinking about it necessarily as an asset that they should be managing, just like they manage any other asset on their books, right? Any equipment that they use, or payroll and things like that. So it's just the old, I think, traditional model that everyone's used to until they hear something different, right? And I think, honestly, in some prospects that we work with, some of the hardest points to get across is that we are different and our presentations are different. You're not going to get a canned presentation from us, right? We're going to try to build something out specific to your organization. And I just think it's something that not a lot of people are doing. And so, to answer your question, Eric, probably in the simplest terms, I think, is exposure. They haven't been exposed to a new model. They're just kind of used to the traditional way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so almost a lack of education in the marketplace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the people selling it are incentivized to not change.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, let's face it, healthcare costs are increasing at a rate, almost 2 times regular inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's getting up to, number 3, number 2, almost even number 1 on your P&L or your expenses. And so really in the past, it was never that way. It was maybe 7, 6. And so it's kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's a big ticket item. And so they're starting to think, we have to take control of this. And hopefully, it's not too late. It's never too late. You just got to have the right strategy in order to take control. But it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that the price has crept up as much as it has, you're starting to see more and more people ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
How can we fix this? How can we do it differently?
Oh, that's the truth. Yeah, no, and Ryan brings up a good point that, brokers aren't incentivized to change necessarily. So I'm curious, your experience, even since you've got to GDP over the last 3 years, with it operating within this model, what results has that driven for you guys? You don't have to get into specific numbers or anything, but what experience, results, growth, whatever you guys have seen in this model?
Yeah, as a firm, I mean, we've grown tremendously. We've been lucky enough to do it right next to you guys. So as more and more people are starting to ask those questions, they're really starting to understand that they can do it differently, as I said. And now it's starting to be word of mouth, and we do have the benefit of having a guy like Seth who's out there talking about it. He has, a lot of publicity behind him. And honestly, I don't think a lot of our sales are even driven from that. I think it's driven from the work that we put in and the strategies that we employ. But it's really, asset management over transactional purchase. And so that thinking and having those financial conversations instead of a benefits conversation or insurance conversation, we're talking about EBITDA. How do I increase your EBITDA? How do I, add more to your bottom line? And I think when you're talking to executives, C-level leadership, they understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're starting to be more involved in the conversation because it is so expensive. And I think that has helped, right? I think the cost of healthcare has helped because people know that they need a change. But I also think, the word's getting out there that something can be done about it. Not just shopping carriers is no longer a solution.
Absolutely.
Used to be more of an HR decision. Now it's a C-suite decision.
Exactly.
That's
But,
good way to put it.
HR plays a big role. Our most successful clients, our clients that are paying less today than they, were when they came on with us 5 years ago, they have an engaged HR staff, right? And let's say HR is able to educate, get people to use these programs in the correct way to where the employees can get 100% benefit. The employer ends up saving $100,000 in a year, and that's not realistic. I mean, that's very realistic. And so if you can save the company $100,000 by having an engaged HR staff, invest back into the HR members. So they're continuing to do that, and now you're creating smarter consumers, as employees, but also creating a more engaged, smarter, more aggressive HR staff who has a happier life. Because their pay is going up too. But our model takes a lot of the work off of HR, and they hear it, right? Because you've heard me say, we're managing the claims on a day-to-day basis. We're doing this, we're doing that. And sometimes that can seem overwhelming. But you have to remember, I talked about the team in the beginning. We have an entire team that does that for you. And the idea is to take the time off of the HR individuals so they can focus their time internally on the organization, right? Benefits should be our big rock. It should not be yours. And so HR does play a big role, but you're exactly right, Eric. Sometimes it takes the C-level, the executive team, the leadership team, almost they have to be exposed to it. They have to know what's going on in order to make that decision. HR can then figure it out later that it was good for them. But we do run into that sometimes, right? It's definitely a challenge.
Definitely. So you said the term big rock in there. So maybe to get a little bit more granular on the how, right? Because we always like to, let people take away something they can implement or whatnot. Without giving away the secret sauce totally of what you guys do, I think a really unique process, or whatever you want to call it, meeting with a client that you guys do, is the big rocks call, right? And how that defines where the company's going, our client's company's going, and helps then define the strategy, right? So maybe just talk through, how that works and the thought process behind it. Again, to as much of an extent as you want, but I think that's a super unique way to start that conversation.
Yeah, so I always say probably the thing that I enjoy most about my job and what I do is I get to learn about so many different organizations and learn about so many different companies and the internal operations. And so we have quarterly calls where we're not always just talking about benefits, right? We actually kind of set the benefits discussion aside, and they're my favorite calls because we get to ask, what are your big rocks for the year? Not just this year, what are they for next year and for the third year after that? And then we build a benefit strategy based on their organization's goals. That has been missed traditionally, I feel, right? And as a true consultant, as a true advisor, you need to know what's going on internally at the organization. You need to know how the people think. You need to know how they communicate. Is it a construction company? Are they offsite at different construction sites? Well, you're going to have to change your communication strategy if that's the case. Eric, you had mentioned it, right? Is your big rock that you need to increase cash because you're going to sell next year, right? I need to definitely change the benefit strategy in order for you to do that, right? Let's cut our fixed cost as much as we can, limit claim spend. And so you have that, you're in a good position next year to sell. Or, are you going to be around for a long time? Let's develop a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year strategy. But it's not a set it and forget it thing, right? And nothing we do is. So it's constantly being reviewed. We're constantly learning more. And I've benefited, I think, the most from that and having those conversations. And it's amazing, people love to talk about not only themselves, but their companies And so some of those calls are usually scheduled 30 minutes to an hour. Some of them go 2 hours. And they're my favorite calls to be on. So,
How?
Oh, good.
Give me an example of how strategy changes with a company that is going to sell next year versus a company that's going to, try to grow like mad over the next decade.
yeah. So if they're going to be selling next year, right, we want to try to kind of really reduce their expenses as much as we can. And maybe that means, might come with a little bit of employee disruption. Let's just shift as much cost as we can away from the employer to increase their bottom line. And really, from a plan design perspective is probably where you're going to get a lot of that done. We never agree with that as a long-term strategy, right?
But it drives up value, drives up profit.
Yeah, drives up
Short-term
value,
sales.
drives up profit, just like anything else, right?
Yeah.
Slash expenses is essentially what we would do.
Mm-hmm.
And in the most aggressive manner. It's probably going to peel, really, staff's not going to be happy.
Yeah.
But there's ways to get it done. As you're looking at a 3-year strategy, that's when you're talking about, how can we retain more employees? How can we attract more employees? How do we create 100% benefit? And at times, you heard me mention kind of incentivizing HR.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and you guys know this, you have to take on risk, but you also have to reinvest and invest in, your employees, invest in the company, invest in the benefits in order to, retain or attract employees. And so that's how our really strategy would then shift, right? How can we kind of take the money that we've saved through, being a part of the program so far and reinvest it into our benefits, into the employees, so it can be a more long-term play, more long-term strategy. So again, it's a financial conversation, right? So increase cash, spend cash, whatever, manage it as an asset, and that's truly what we're doing.
Just so interesting. Like, there's so many things that come to mind when I think about this. Is like, as an exit planner, I just salivate over the opportunity to catch somebody 10 years out, 5 years out from exiting, and the opportunity that we have at that point, because it's not just from a benefit perspective. They're buying new equipment.
It's all over the company.
Yeah, then they have to go into their accountant and talk about depreciation recapture at the end of the year when they're getting ready to sell, and their tax bill's massive, and just lack of coordination and planning with everybody around what they can do to try to get a higher multiple, is insane. There's so much opportunity on the table because people aren't coordinating within a strategy.
Yeah. And I think that's, Eric, you hit on it's Ryan. My bad.
I was going to correct you
Ryan.
at the end, but
Yeah.
You're all right.
Worked a
Eric
lot
is
with
Ryan's
you.
brother.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Logan works a lot with him.
Should have corrected me right away. I apologize. Sorry, Ryan. You hit on a great part, and I think that's why, our relationship works so well, is because we can bounce those ideas off of each other and use different resources, right? I know benefits. I do that very well. I don't know a lot of the things that you're talking about, right? And that's why having a huge team be a part of this means a lot, because we can pull in, different resources when they need them, based on where the organization is and where they're going.
Yeah. Well, I think what it highlights as well is that, you're in the benefits space, but you're impacting the value of the company. I don't think many benefits brokers and a lot of advisors view it that way. It's just minimize cost, increase benefits, or whatever, which is a great thing to do. But when you're going in and having the conversation around where's the company going, what are you trying to accomplish, then let's figure out how does the benefits package or solution help you get there, right? That's way more valuable to a business owner. You're helping them achieve their most important goals versus just a great benefits package, which again is something that we should be striving for. But I think it applies to Ryan's point, any of the areas in which we work in the risk management industry, P&C insurance, exit planning. key people. It could be a huge one. That's a massive one if you're going to sell the company, or if you're going to build a company for 10 years down the road.
Absolutely.
Well, it takes me back. I mean, it's spot on. It takes me back to, again, like, it makes me wonder how many consumers are thinking about the value of their company versus their P&L.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely different. And
not many, I would guess. Think about it that way.
How it would change your perspective if you could look at it from a value standpoint.
Yeah.
So we do that. We talk about this all the time, how we make value-based decisions in every aspect of our life, but then we're just blinded by some, and we can't get past it.
Yeah.
And
we talked about that a little bit with workers' comp, right? Mm-hmm. And that's something that you guys, do really, really well, and we work in that space too, but it's never really seen as a benefit.
Yeah.
But it truly is.
It absolutely is.
So it's just how you look at it, right? How do you start looking at it differently and then managing it differently to get a different outcome?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it's funny too when Ryan talks about the value perspective. It's like hiring a new salesperson. You can extrapolate out the revenue growth on that, but there's a multiple on top of that is actually the value of the company, right?
Yep.
Typically. That's what the value of minimizing the expense on benefits, if you're going to go sell, is. It's not just dollar for dollar. It's dollar times 6 or whatever the multiple is.
Yeah.
When you start to quantify some of those things for a business owner and what we do on a daily basis, it's super powerful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be some complex equation. Most business owners know their industry multiples, or they're easy to find out or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, if you can get into that level of a conversation and relationship with your client, it's way more valuable of a relationship both ways.
Yeah, I think that's that too. A lot of the things and a lot of the strategies that we will suggest can be tough to put an ROI on. We talked about investing back into the employees and back into the HR staff. At one point, is that going to pay off, right? And I think you have to think about it in a way that it's truly an investment, right? If you want to get to where you need to be as an organization from a benefit standpoint, at least in my eyes, right? Sometimes you have to take the risk, even if the numbers financially today aren't telling you that.
Yeah.
Kind of have to dive in and, take on a little bit of risk. And I think, as business owners, they understand that. So just, again, shifting the conversation a little bit.
Changing the way our clients think, right?
It's what we try to do.
In the industry.
And our industry.
Yeah.
And everybody else.
Yeah, well, Ryan was asking earlier about, the consumer, the client's perspective, kind of us, and shifting that tide. Because, one of the reasons that we do these podcast episodes and stuff is the more that we can shift not only our industry's thinking, but our clients' thinking, so that they are asking for more of this type of a model. You mentioned it earlier where it's becoming such of an expense, health insurance in particular, such an expense that it's kind of opening people's eyes to saying, we got to fix this. But I just curious your perspective on where you feel like the industry as a whole is in that shift, and then from the client's perspective, like in reality, how many people have kind of seen the light and are making that shift?
Yeah. So,
and don't go with the 80-20 rule, because that's usually what we go with. We got to come up with something different. But.
Yeah, I think this year, especially with everything with the pandemic, we're seeing a lot more of a shift, right? So, some carriers will tell you that they took it in the shorts from the pandemic, but honestly, we're not seeing that. We're seeing a lot of profit on that side. So if you're a self-funded employer, you actually had an advantage through, much of 2019, 2020. And so that has helped, and I think that's helped increase awareness. The challenge, and one thing we've done really, really well, is the smaller to mid-sized employers. The larger employers can take on a little more risk. They've always kind of been introduced to self-funding, what it is, how do we manage it.
Been doing it for a while.
Exactly.
Space, yeah.
And it's more prominent, right? Mm-hmm. So, and most agencies probably would have recommended that to them before, or should have, at least. But it's the smaller to mid-sized employers, are under 50s, 20 to 50, even sometimes even 100, right? that have traditionally always thought, I can't do it. I can't take on the risk volatility. We've built our programs so they can, and we're seeing an uptick in that market, right? Because they're now starting to see, well, there is a way. There is a way for me to do this. And I would say just within the past years, we've probably seen that increase probably 30, 40%.
Oh, wow. Yeah, which is good to see. I mean, it comes back to those strategies available to those large businesses. They have been for a while, and especially the Fortune 500 have been doing these types of things for a long time. And it is nice to see some of those opportunities, coming down to smaller employers and being able to show the same value to them that, we can to a large employer. And I think that that's only going to continue this shift, which, who knows? We talk about the financial services industry and that kind of transition, which it's not fully transitioned. Obviously, there's still a lot of brokers out there, but through regulation and some pretty significant market events, they were forced to make that switch. And hopefully we can transition as an industry to that without having some sort of a major, although, we could argue on the benefits side, at what point is it just unaffordable to offer benefits and health insurance to your clients, especially if you're not engaged in some of these strategic decisions like you're having, and that might be some of the catalyst to it. Who knows? But I think the health insurance side is a little bit further down that road than, say, the P&C side or some of the other sides of the industry. But I think it's definitely transitioning to that. And some of these conversations that we have are really fun to hear people's different perspectives on that. Yeah. Well, we just got the signal from old Big Al that we're up on time. So anything else to throw out to the?
I don't think so.
Listening?
It was very fun. I'd say just kind of as a takeaway, take some risk, right? Learn what's out there. If you're not hearing anything that we're talking about today, if you're not hearing something different, then go ask about it.
Yeah.
Because there are solutions out there that can help you.
Yeah, I love that. You can get a copy of Seth's book, The Cure. Got to plug that for him.
Yep, plug The Cure for Seth. Yeah. It's been great.
Reach out. I'm sure Seth will send you a copy. All right. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, take care.
Soon.
It's a good
Thank
time.
You guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Getting Past the Premium. We are excited to continue breaking down barriers and finding solutions together. If you would like to reach out regarding anything you heard in today's episode, find links and contact info in the description. Until next time, have a great day, and let's continue getting past the premium.